when you have certain people oppressed, right? And this could be just about everybody at this point. It's hard to see or to envision yourself in places of greatness if you don't see it, if you don't have that exposure.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of Deck Creator Corner. Today, I will be joined by Brittany Lewis Moore, who is the creatrix in process of the Cosmic Gateways Tarot, which she has just recently released the title of that. So I'm really excited to jump on this conversation with her. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, Brittany. This tarot deck has been on my radar for so long.
I know it. I know it. That's so awesome. Like it's so humbling because it's a project that I dreamed about doing, and when I
Mm.
started, I just kind of went for mine. Like I just was like caution to the wind. So to have people like yourself and others so excited about it, it's so humbling.
So before we get started, Brittany, I
Mhm.
would like to just do a quick intention setting, cleansing of the space.
Mhm.
I have my little trusty maraca here.
All right.
And I basically just like to invite us, and those watching the live are also welcome to join in, to just take a couple of deep breaths and center and ground into the space. I just really feel like that really kind of sets the atmosphere for the rest of the
I
conversation.
love it. Let's do it.
So yeah, if you'd like to join me in that, that would be amazing. I'll just do 2 or 3 couple of breaths with the maraca, and then we can jump into the conversations.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you for joining, everybody. All right. Thank you. That was lovely. Um, okay, cool. So I think it's time for us to just jump into this interview, Brittany. I would like to start off with giving you a little bit of space to like give us a quick intro to who Brittany is, what B Lewis or Bluis, how do I
B.
say it all
Lewis.
together?
I have B. Lewis Arts and
B
then Blue
Lewis.
Lotus Tarot.
Blue Lotus Tarot. Okay.
Mhm.
See, I knew one of them was blue, but I couldn't figure out.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so yeah, so tell us a little bit about you, a little bit about Blue B Lewis Arts. What are your aspirations, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Right. So my name is Brittany Lewis Amore. I'm out of Tennessee. Intuitive tarot reader, awesome artist, I think.
I
um,
agree.
yeah. Deck creator. Some of my aspirations right now are just to sort of bridge the gap between representation and spiritual imagery. It's something that I love. It's something that I feel like I can fully express myself and be myself and that's pretty much it. B. Lewis Arts is where it started. And funny thing is that I always been into tarot, right? And I always been an artist. And for whatever reason, in my mind, they were two separate things. No
Mm,
matter like for how long I had been wanting to do this deck and all of that, it was like two separate things. And so one day I just was like, let's merge it. Like let's fully step into who I am so that they go together and it's a lot about me being reflective of who I am. So
I love that, and I love how I don't know. I just love how quick you are, and like we're ready to go on this conversation. I'm really
yeah.
liking your vibe and everything, and yeah, I think it's really awesome that you're kind of one of your aspirations right now is kind of that diversity and like
Hmm.
inclusivity and spiritual imagery. And I like that you
Right.
said spiritual imagery and not tarot, because
Right.
like it's more than just tarot. Like
Hmm.
the whitewashing goes beyond tarot, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so I love that it goes just beyond only what's going on in the tarot cards. And
Hmm.
I think it's a perfect segue into this question, into like how did you get into tarot, and then how did that
Hmm.
kind of lead into up to this, you wanting to create a deck because for
Yeah.
whatever reason.
Sure. Yeah. So this was something I was talking to my mom about recently. I don't know when it started, right? I have always been into the occult. I've always been into mystery systems since I was a kid. I would see things, I would hear things, and so for me, it's just everyday life, right?
Mm.
So when I was about 16, I picked up my first tarot deck. And at this time, this was like early 2000s, there wasn't a lot of information about how to read tarot. It wasn't very beginner friendly, in my opinion. And so I just kind of put it aside. And I had
Hmm.
got into some other stuff, reading and exploring who I am. And I was doing something very similar to runes, but I was reading a lot of that. And I was like, you know what? I want to start tarot again. so, so that's sort of how it began again. So,
Yeah.
so that's where we are. As far as the deck, what happened was once I got back into tarot, I knew that one of the problems I had at 16 was that I was starting with the Rider Waite. And for a 16-year-old, it was like, what the hell am I looking at?
Yeah. Girl, I feel you.
And so that was always an issue. And so when I got back into it, it was like, okay, well, let's find a deck. Before I buy anything, let me find something that I connect with. And trying to find something that I connected with was the biggest challenge. Like it was awful. It was like, okay, and this is no shade or anything to any previously made decks or none of that. But for me, it was something I couldn't personally find something that I thought represented me, or at least represented the greater, you know.
Right.
So at that moment, I was like, well, okay, well, one of these days, I think I should make a deck. so, so I ended up going with the Golden Thread Tarot. That was the first one I started with once I got back into
Mm.
it. And then the next one was like Crow, but they were always these ambiguous, sort of like no personal identity types of decks. And that's where that began. And
Hmm.
so 2019. I was well, actually, some years building up to this, I was going through a phase in my spiritual journey as well as my artistic journey where I was feeling like I wasn't really expressing myself. Like I was making art that I thought people would buy, which I think as an artist is like it's okay to start there, right? If you don't know what to create, it's a great place to start, but it's not sustainable for an artist. And
Right.
so the question came up, okay, well, what do I want to say? What message do I want to put out there? And then that's when stuff started clicking into place. So I was like, into 2019, I'm done with, for a while anyway, I'm done with this stuff. Let me do what I want to do. So that's where it started.
That's amazing. And I think it really it just goes to show that like when you're in search for like your authenticity, when you're in
Mm-hmm.
search for like your spirituality, when you're trying to resonate and find something that will reflect back to you your own story,
Mm-hmm.
that's when like the magic happens, right? Because that is kind of lacking for a lot of people in the
Mm-hmm.
spiritual community because the misrepresentation, right? And it
Right.
also applies to people like, fat people,
Mm-hmm.
disabled people, like it goes beyond like skin tone as well.
Right.
But it's amazing to see that like when you don't resonate, you can't find something, then make it, right? Like,
Right.
like
Exactly.
create the
Yep.
deck, like
Mm-hmm.
be that change,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's amazing because last year when I saw the Queen Osset tarot
Mm-hmm.
summit about diversity, that for me was a really big moment in my life.
Mm.
And that was actually the inspiration. That's what inspired me to go on and want to create my own deck because I realized that my indigenous people, the Taino people, they don't
Mm-hmm.
have representation in tarot
Right.
either.
Mm-hmm.
And I connect with tarot and I want to be able to look at a tarot card and connect it back to my island. I should be able to
Right.
do that. And there was no deck like that. And so I was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, I'm making one then,
That's
like,
right. There you go.
and even though it was scary to make that decision, because I
Mm-hmm.
never considered myself an artist or
Mm-hmm.
like not even close. Like I don't doodle, I don't draw, like I
Mm-hmm.
don't paint, like not even the closest thing. And so for me, it was a really big like imposter syndrome. Like I had to move past
Mm-hmm.
that and being like, who am I to make a tarot deck? I'm not
Mm-hmm.
even an artist.
Yeah, go for it, man.
And so, yeah, and it's been a really big process of just going for it and like being confident in what I want to manifest and what I want to create, and seeing you kind of embark on that and like recognizing the need that was missing and then filling it
Right.
yourself, like that's so powerful.
It
And it
is.
leads into this next question that I want to talk about with you, is like, so we talked about like you wanted to create a deck that you resonated with.
Mm-hmm.
So now the question is, why is this important? Why is it important to have this inclusivity and this diversity in tarot, but also like in spirituality, like in the spiritual images? Like why do we need to like ensure that we're making these kinds of decks and including these kinds of decks in mainstream society?
Right. So, okay, this is something I thought a lot about, right? When you have certain people oppressed, right, and this could be just about everybody at this point, it's hard to see or to envision yourself in places of greatness if you don't see it, if you don't have that exposure. So, for people, just to give an example, you might have someone who lives in a specific neighborhood and they can't envision themselves being something greater than that neighborhood if they've never seen it. So, in my opinion, it's important because it's just the easiest way to envision yourself as being great, as embodying a God power, as embodying a goddess power, if you see it. So that's why it's for me, it's been very, very important to sort of uh, take part in creating those images. Because just imagine if a little girl sees herself as just this beautiful princess, you can't tell her nothing. Right? There is nothing nobody can tell that person because they see themselves as such greatness. Their confidence is higher. They, interact with people on a whole nother level. Things are more than superficial conversations. You can, dig deep. And so for me, that's a lot of it. And it's so easy to impress people if they can't even imagine themselves as something greater. So that's, to me, is my soapbox.
Well, and I think that's amazing, and I think it's really reflected actually in one of the cards that you've sent me to put in the graphic, that the strength card,
Mm-hmm.
where it has that little girl and she's just standing there so powerfully and so confident. Like I
Yeah.
can just imagine, like you said, all these little girls of color seeing a
Mm-hmm.
card like that and being like, oh my God, I see myself in that image. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
me. Like I
Yep.
actually can be that. Whereas like seeing even an adult,
Mm-hmm.
just whatever, not even seeing yourself reflected in that. And I love that your tarot deck, at least the images that I've seen, are also very much appropriate for like all ages, not
Mm-hmm.
just adults or
Right.
teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
Like children could actually use this deck too, and there's nothing wrong with them exploring some of the archetypes and some of the topics
Right.
that we're talking about, and so I think it's really important to make these kinds of tools
Mm-hmm.
accessible to all ages. And
Right.
I really like that you said specifically, like, well, what if a little girl wants to see herself reflected in a
Mm-hmm.
tarot deck and she just doesn't,
Right.
And that's really powerful, especially considering, like, with children, it's so much easier for them to kind of slip into like the magic, and like
Mm-hmm.
they
Mm-hmm.
can just like go into the story world and
They're
like
so
see
much
all of
freer. Yeah.
right, they have
Mm-hmm.
that wonder. And so I think it's amazing. Actually, this is a question now that just came up.
Mm-hmm.
Did you intentionally create like an ageless feel? Did you want that to be part
Yeah.
of the deck?
My thing with as far as creating was I had my only parameters is that I wanted it to be representative of the African diaspora. That was it. I was like,
Mm.
and I didn't want to illustrate suffering because that was the energy I was getting back from a lot of the decks that featured black people. It was always to me a vibe of suffering. So those were my only things.
Mm.
As far as the strength card, that one actually was inspired by my sister, my younger sister,
Mm.
and a meeting with fox spirits. So it's like I always had this affinity for fox spirits, and she's one of those really, really strong individuals. And so, especially when we were kids, like she would get into everything. So for me, strength was like, okay, and she has daughters also. So I'm thinking, well, what if my nieces were into this? I want them to be included or feel
Mm.
included and feel represented. So yeah, no, it was it was whatever comes to me.
That's amazing, and I think it's so important what you said. And I talked about this with Shaniqua too, with that Afro Drip Tarot, about like the importance of like representing like that the African diaspora and
Mm-hmm.
people of color, like
Mm-hmm.
specifically in tarot,
Mm-hmm.
because like for example myself, because I do have like a lighter skin tone,
Mm-hmm.
I'm more prone to not realizing that I'm not represented.
Right. Mm-hmm.
um and so when I first was doing tarot and stuff, it was years before like I really realized
Yeah.
that there were no people of color. Like
Mm-hmm.
it truly took me years, and I've been reading
Yeah.
tarot for 10 years now, and it's like, wow, how have I never like
Right.
realized,
It's a huge void. Like, and this just goes for Latinos, this goes for Asians, this goes for just about, if there is a huge void that I feel like just fill it. Like let's just get to work and do
Yes, and
it.
and that's why like I, at least in my experience from the tarot community, like just even 5 years ago compared to now,
Mhm.
wow, the number of
Mhm.
indie decks and diversity and this and that, like people like Venable Wen making all of these Spirit Keeper tarot, like representing
Yes.
Asian people, people
Mhm.
like you and Shaniqua, people like Mari in the Sky and me trying to bring the
Mhm.
indigenous vibes. Like there's all of these new vibes and these new indie creators coming through, and even some of the more mainstream
Mhm.
publishers, like they're also starting to become like a lot more diverse in their
Yeah.
imagery and stuff. Like Liminal 11 is a pretty like it's
Oh
a
yeah, with the
publisher.
modern witch. Oh yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying, like,
Mhm.
and so even the mass market, there we go,
Mhm.
that's the phrase I'm looking for. Even the mass markets are now including these more diverse and
Right.
open imageries, and so I'm really loving this like shift that's going on.
Me too. Yeah.
And like you said, like there is that void, and so like it's up to us to fill it, and I really
Mhm.
feel like we are, like I feel
Yeah.
like we're coming through, like the
Oh, it's
artists
happening.
and the pagans and the
Yeah.
magic people and the witches were like, all right, we got to band together, like
Right.
we got to do this. Cool. So yeah, I think it's really important to have this kind of work and to really be confident in the
Mhm.
work that we want to bring into the world and stuff. And so for me, um, it's a big driving force behind why I want to do my tarot decks as well,
Mhm.
because I want them to be like a symbol or a sign or an example of how we can use this tool to enhance our spirituality and
Right.
include diversity in our lives and stuff. I did want to, we talked about the strength card a little bit, and before
Mhm.
we move on to the next question, in one of my other lives, they asked this question a lot where it was like, which has been the card that has been the most difficult for you to kind of
Mhm.
illustrate?
Uh-huh.
And which one has been your favorite so far?
So the most difficult was the Hierophant, hands down. It got so. I was ready for that one, hands down. Like that was the hardest card. And for me, I have to I tend to get in my own way, which is, and I'll say this: working on this deck has taught me so much about myself, right? And I'm learning so much about like myself and things that are holding me back and beliefs that I have to just kind of
Uh-oh.
let go of.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. Okay. So the Hierophant was like, I had an idea, and it took me like a month to get this card done, which is ridiculous. So I had an idea, and for whatever reason, I got stuck. And when I got stuck, I was like, okay, well, let me go do something else, and I just could not move forward. And it wasn't until like my husband he gave me this like pep talk, like, look, we ain't got time for this. Like, get on board. So I had to sort of push through that. That one was like, it was, and I will say this: the reason being is that is one of my least favorite cards, just out of all of tarot. So for me, the relationship between me and the Hierophant before I created the card was, this is somebody who is like oppressive, and you got to do it this way. There's always a right and wrong. And it wasn't until I sort of pushed through that fear, which was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of it, and just kind of made myself sit down and work on it, that I started to understand the card. And my understanding of it, I think, sort of drove the imagery. So that was the roughest. But my favorite is the Lovers. That's my
Mm.
absolute favorite. That image came to me in a meditation, and the meditation was about something. But I'm one of those types of people. It was a guided meditation. The lady says, "Go towards the light." I'm like, okay, well, I wonder what's back here.
You gotta
So
do you, girl. You
I
gotta
went
do
back
you.
there. I went back there, and that's where I got that image from. Like it was what I experienced, and it's something that holds so dear to me. So that's my favorite. Yeah.
I love both of those stories, and especially the Hierophant because so that card
Uh-huh.
is complicated.
Uh-huh. My
um,
word.
so now we're talking a little bit about Rider-Waite-Smith and all that stuff,
Hmm.
and I wanted to know how much liberty you gave yourself to kind of like detour away from the typical Rider-Waite-Smith, and
Hmm.
if you changed any of the names, I don't know if you have.
Right.
But yeah, I just wanted to know a little bit about like how close or far away it is from the Rider-Waite-Smith.
Right. So currently, I think the closest one that I have to that deck is probably the hanging one, which I did change the name of. That's probably the closest as far as poses go. But my intention was to explore the cards based on what I felt like they, whatever my interpretation was, as well as my own experience.
Mm.
So a lot of the times I'll come across a card and I'll immediately like, okay, well, this reminds me, just the meanings of it, not necessarily original imagery, but this reminds me of this situation. Or what does that look like if it were an actual in today's world, even though it's a little
Hmm.
sci-fi, what would that look like now? So that's a lot of what I do. I've been thinking about this, especially as I get like the majors done and start moving into the minors, how close I'll stay to right away. I probably won't for the most part. Unless I just like get stuck or something, like I don't know what to do. And then okay, let's just use that as a blueprint. But for the most part, no. Like now I will say that I would like for that to be sort of the framework because I know that's the most popular system. And when someone is if they're using this deck as a beginner, I want them to be able to refer back to, mainstream interpretations. But other than that,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like you want it to kind of be like you said, like the blueprints, but you
hmm
fill in like all of the intricacies and all of the different symbols and all that stuff. And that's why like I do have a lot of issues with the Rider-Waite-Smith, but
hmm
at the same time, I can glean a lot from it
right.
because
hmm
Pamela Coleman Smith is an
hmm
amazing illustrator,
Right. And
and
don't
there's
get the credit she
so
deserves.
many
hmm
symbols and little hidden things that you don't notice
hmm
if you don't study the cards. And so like for me, Rider-Waite-Smith has always been like an educational deck,
hmm
not like a using deck. I
Right.
don't ever
Okay.
use it. I
Yeah.
only use it like if I'm looking at a new deck and I'm looking at the Hierophant on that deck,
hmm
and I'm like, okay, well, what's the old Hierophant? So I go ahead and I pull
Right,
my
right.
Rider-Waite-Smith, and then I just do a comparison. But I
Yeah.
don't think I hardly ever use it for reading
I'm the
because I just don't
same. Yeah.
resonate it.
I don't either. And you know what? I didn't even repurchase like the first one I bought at 16. I didn't repurchase a Rider Waite Smith deck until maybe last year. And that was because I was just like, okay, let me look at it.
You know?
And it was it was the Centennial Edition where they used her
Oh yeah.
original. So it was still just, I felt like resonated more with her than it did with Ryder or Waite. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just really cool to kind of have this play between using it as a blueprint and as like a
hmm
source of reference, and then you having that liberty to put into it whatever you want to do.
Right.
Um, so that's really awesome. And I kind of want I want to jump into the next question here, which I want to talk a little bit about the name. I know that that's a little under wraps, but I
Right.
wanted to see if we could get maybe an origins, like how you came up with that or like where that
Yeah.
came from.
Okay. So listen, right around the time I did the second card, which was Justice, I had gone through this huge spiritual like shift, like a breakthrough. It was a huge breakthrough, right? And I was doing Justice, and I was, creating this image of Matt, and I had this sort of gateway through it, and I came to the realization that each part of our spiritual journey just kind of leads us to the next phase, whatever that may be, the next thing to work on, the next sort of step towards enlightenment. And it just dawned on me. I was like, oh, I could do this as the Cosmic Gateways Tarot. And the idea, which was something that came to me, during the same breath, was that again, each part of our journey sort of leads us to the next thing until we transcend and, do whatever comes afterwards, right? And so that's sort of where that came from. And during this time, it was so intense. It was such an intense period. But yeah, that's where it came from. And so I was keeping it under wraps, but I was like, why am I hiding this thing? Like, let me tell people what this deck is called.
That was the thing for me when I first saw the picture, the death picture. I was like, what's the name? Where's it? I looked through all your posts and I was like, where is it? But I understand, there was a big part of me too that was like, I wasn't sure if I should share what I'm doing or if I should keep it under wraps. Like, because I was reading a lot about like deck creating and stuff. And I remember coming upon an article or something about like being careful with sharing your ideas.
Right. Yes.
Because like there are people who have like the capital to
that was my main thing. That was my main thing. I'm like, look, I'm just a country girl from Tennessee. I was like, this project is so special to me, but I think I was holding it too close. And I think that because of that, I wasn't totally being free. And I was also moving in a space of fear. And it was like, well, these people are already watching, like, being approached by people. They got looking to money behind them, they're gonna steal my name. But I was like, you know what? No, that's I had to look at it. I had to change my perspective. And I was like, well, people are really into this deck. Folks fight for what they love. So I was like, well, let me just, be free in what I share to an extent. Like, there's still things that you want to keep to yourself.
Right.
But as far as that goes, I was like, let's do this. Okay, look.
It's so amazing because like one of my goals for this series was to like not just for people who want to create decks, but also between us, how can we help each other? Like I've had conversations already with a few of the ones that I've interviewed, and they're all like, listen, if you or anybody needs anything, like, let me know. I can help you. Like, I can guide you. If I can help you, I will. Like, and that's kind of what I wanted to do, because I know that creating a deck can sound really scary.
Yes.
It can sound like, I'm going to create a deck, I'm going to publish something. Like, what? Like, that sounds really ridiculous.
I went through all of that, and it was like, okay, it went from like this novel idea to, okay, well, let's just make a deck. And then I got to thinking, well, how in the hell am I going to get this thing printed? Or is my audience going to like leave me behind? Because, I went through all of that, I swear.
Yep, and I think we all do, and I think that's why I wanted to create the space to show people that we're all just human beings. Like, none of us are superhuman.
I'm with you all the way. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's just a matter of being patient with yourself. And when like for me, like with that Hierophant, I got so stuck and like so flustered, and then I was nervous to share it, which was a whole nother battle. But you just have to kind of do your best. Just do your best. Be confident in who you are. Be confident in your voice, and just go for it. But those people, especially Benavelle, because she has the now I don't know if you know this, but she has the indie tarot course.
Shaniqua told me about it. I have not gotten it yet, but
listen, that is the best. I don't even know I think it's like $40. That is the best.
It's 40, yeah.
Yeah, investment I got that early on, like maybe after the first or second card. And just kind of because about like interviewing different deck creators, I was like, I don't know anyone who's ever done this. I don't know how forthcoming people will be if I just kind of get in their DMs like, hey, so when I stumbled across her program, it changed the game. It changed the game, and it put everything into perspective. So it went from this novel idea to, okay, well, let's do this. Let's like organize my information. Let's, come up with the plan. Let's start sharing. Let's find some manufacturers. Let's contact them. All of that. I promise. Get that if you can. Get that.
I've been meaning to, and I keep on forgetting to do it, but I'm definitely going to do it because, like you said, it brings it down from like the ethereal like idea to like concrete physical things to do, like so that you can move forward. And that's what people need, right? They don't need like just the ideas and the concepts. They need like, okay, so how do I actually do that? You know,
Right.
like,
Mm-hmm.
so that's, so I think that's really awesome. And I encourage anybody watching, if you're a deck creator, definitely check that resource out, because this is already the second person to recommend it. So I think
It's invaluable.
also Way of the Panda, Kim San, I believe she also has like a free PDF for deck creators. So go check that out too, if
For
that,
sure, yeah.
you know. Okay, so I wanted to move on here and ask you some questions about the art. Um, so how was that? Were you already an artist? I think you kind of mentioned that you already had
Yeah.
B. Lewis art and stuff, and you kind of did this.
Yeah.
Did you did you have to kind of learn new skills for this, or were you already kind of using mediums that you were used to? Yeah, so let's start there.
Sure. So I've been an artist literally my entire life. It's like one of those things that's second nature for me. I became professional around 2007 or 8, and worked corporate America, all of that. And so fast forward 2011, I started freelancing. But in the realm of that, I was doing a lot of comic book conventions and sort of pop culture things. So what I work with to create the deck is stuff that I'd already been doing anyway. But I will say that um, within that, I had things that I needed to work on. So, for instance, it used to be that I couldn't do a background to save my life. Like I could, I could paint a face, maybe blindfolded, all day long. But to put her in like a scene, that was where I struggled. And so, as I've been progressing through this tarot deck, it's given me opportunities to practice and sort of think about how the cards are composed and how they feel, and do they feel too close and in the face, and does that drive the meaning of the card? And so that for me is what it's been, as far as learning and expanding. And then as an artist, you kind of grow as you go anyway. So yeah, that's where it's been.
That's really awesome. And so, is it Procreate that you're using?
No, actually, I use Clip Studio Paint. I have Procreate. I can't figure it out. Like, let me go with what I know. So I use Clip Studio Paint, and I use Affinity Designer to set up sort of the frame and to correct colors and add the type.
That's really cool. Yeah, see, that's where I've been struggling, because I'm going to work with my brother as the illustrator. And so that was like a big decision for me, because like a big part of me wanted to like go and spend a long time trying to learn how to do Procreate and digital art so that I could do it myself.
Right.
But I just felt that like I had like this vision of it in my head, and like it was going to be really hard for me to manifest that myself. And so
I see.
instead, the challenge that I gave myself artistically was to do the sketches of the cards.
Nice. Yeah.
And so that for me felt comfortable. I felt like I can do that. I can do a sketch and concept out like a paragraph or something, and share that and feel like I'm part of the process.
Right. I was going to say your energy is still there, because that artist will then use your sketch and, come up with the composition. So that works. That's awesome.
Exactly. And so I'm like, for those people who maybe are wanting to create a deck and aren't artists per se, don't be afraid to still do it, and I've interviewed a couple of people who commission, got an illustrator for the tarot deck, and that was a big shadow for me, because I was like, oh, if I don't create it, it's not as powerful.
No, not at all. I don't think that. Especially if you're hands-on, like you said, with the sketches, and your ideas are sort of being communicated to whoever's doing your work. It's all your energy. So I think, and then energy flows. Well, it goes all that work,
exactly,
man.
Exactly.
Hey,
so I think that's really awesome to be able to kind of have that flexibility, but also to recognize that you've been an artist your whole life, but you still had a lot to learn. Like it's always a learning process. Like there's never going to be a point in time where you're like, I know everything about tarot.
No, not at all. Not at all.
It's definitely a learning process, and you kind of have to be open to that. So how long has it taken you to get where you are right now? Like from starting, like deciding you started the project and drawing your first card to where we are now?
It's been about six years or so for me.
No,
It
thank
was
you.
a long time.
That's what I want, because I also feel like people feel like they have to rush.
No, not at all. No,
So
no.
I
So
wanted.
my first card I finished in 2019. What happened was I was, like I said, I had gone through the whole thing, had found the deck and decided that I could do this. But for me, it was a matter of getting out of my own way. And so what was happening was I had made up my mind I was going to do it, but let me finish this project first, or let me try this first. And so I kept making
Mm,
excuses as to why I shouldn't start now. Like, oh, and the funny thing is, I wasn't listening to my intuition, and so I was hitting a lot of roadblocks. So if it's something that you want to do, and it's something that's like in your heart to do, just start. Like, just do it. Really. And it's taken me a little bit longer to produce the deck, but you kind of have to be patient with yourself. I don't beat myself up about it. It's like it's coming. But
exactly, and
mhm,
that's I think kind of the main thing that I want to like come across, because a lot, actually most of the people that I've interviewed so far have
mhm.
been like, I thought of the deck this day, 7 months later it was done and I was on Kickstarter, and it's like that's not
Listen, that's not my
that
world.
that it is a common experience for
Yeah.
people, but it's not the only deck creator experience.
Right.
And I think it's really important to highlight that it's not always like you have to, you come up with the project and you have to do all 78 cards within a year or whatever,
Right.
like
Mm.
give yourself that space. I mean, it's good to have a goal. Like my goal, I would like to like launch like a Kickstarter or something in the next
Mhm.
year. That's my like
Right.
goal, but I'm not announcing any dates and I'm not giving
Right.
anything solid,
Right.
because I need to give myself that space. It's just
Right.
possibly in a year there might be a Kickstarter.
Yeah, no, and you know what? I had gotten tripped up on that because I remember listening to a podcast. I think it was a Biddy Tarot podcast, and she was interviewing the girl that illustrated her everyday tarot. And she was like, you know what? I had already started before I signed the contract, and it only took me 3 months to do. And I was like, okay, go ahead on, girl. And I met Yoshi Tani, who does the what is it, Tarot of the Divine? I think it used to be
Yeah.
called Fairy Tale Tarot. So I met her. And she
Oh,
said,
that's
well,
awesome.
it takes about 2 to 5 years. And then, ego's like, girl, please, they knocking them things out in 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah,
And then I start. It's like, okay.
yeah, it's
Oh,
crazy. The Wild Wolf Tarot, Brianna and Madi from Madi in the Sky, the Gentle Tarot, both of them were like, yeah, I kind of like came up with it, and like 7 months later or however month, like Mari finished. She started the Kickstarter and she hadn't even finished illustrating them. So she finished through the like by the Kickstarter she finished illustrating them.
oh, wow.
And so like and for her she was like, that was magic. Like I needed that because that
Right.
was what pushed
Okay.
me to finish.
Yeah.
Like that
Okay.
really got me to finish. Whereas like I was thinking in my mind, I was like, I would not be I
Listen,
would not be able to do that.
I'm the same way. Because I'm like, this is my thinking. I don't want to accept anyone's money without having sort of like, this is what it's gonna be, because I feel as though I don't want to be misleading. I don't want people mad at me if it takes 3 months longer than I attempt, than I originally expected it to be. So for me, I want to be at least maybe 5 or 6 cards away from being done before I start, and then you
Yep.
have to write the book, and then
Yep.
and then there's other stuff to
The deck
consider.
box,
Right, all of
the
that.
deck box,
So,
all that, all the
hmm
dimensions, all that stuff. Like,
yep.
I don't remember who I was talking to. I think it was Shaniqua, because she took that course, the Benadryl
hmm
course, and she
hmm
really kind of delineates like all the stuff
Right,
that you need. And Shaniqua was like, "Do you have this? Do you have
right.
that? Do you
Yep.
have this?" And I was like, "No."
Yeah,
And she was
yeah,
like, "You
no, that
need
helped
to."
me big time because I didn't realize that, and I don't know why I didn't realize this, but I didn't realize that there's a standard deck. It just never clicked. There's
Yeah.
a standard deck size. Personally prefer the size of the Crow Tarot, which is a little bit bigger. So
Mm.
when I first started, I didn't have I was just like, okay, well, what's the size of the card?
Oh.
And so once I got that deck, again, it put everything into perspective because it was like, okay, well, let me consider this. And then I reached out to a manufacturer and was like, okay, well, this is sort of what I'm thinking about. And she was kind enough, and the people that I forget the name of it, but it's in Benny Bell's book. The
Okay.
people were very, very patient with me, and they were like, okay, well, if you do this, it will be an extra fee. You know, there's this, that, and the third to consider. But what they do is they send you a template to use. So mine is, I think,
Oh.
85 by 133 millimeters. And so they sent me the template. They sent me the box template. They sent me, had to order it, but they sent me sample cards to use so that I can kind of consider the cardstock.
Oh.
The finish,
Wow.
listen, $40, baby. Okay,
Wow. That's
all of that.
awesome.
Yeah, so I didn't consider it at first. I didn't know anything about it. I hadn't talked to anybody. You know, I just thought it was okay. Let's make some images. I know the meanings. I kind of have an idea of what I want to do. Let's go there. But this really put it in perspective from the business side of things, because I'm an artist. Business.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's not a race. It's not
right.
about, oh, this person started, after me and they're already finished. Like,
Uh-huh.
that
Mm-mm.
doesn't, none of that. No
No,
comparison. This
no.
isn't a competition. This is just about you living in that authentic energy, right? Like
Right.
expressing what you want to share with the world and what you want the world to see, like reflected back to them,
Mm-hmm.
because like your tarot deck, like it is resonance for you, but I feel like you also hope that like it reflects back to other people
Right.
too, you
Right.
know?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's kind of the powerful part of creating a tarot deck is that like, yes, it's for you. Like, for example, Kim, for Way of the Panda, she's like, I literally made this panda deck because I wanted a panda deck.
Mm-hmm.
But then the end result was hundreds of people are like, I
Right.
love this deck. I want it too. And so
Uh-huh.
that just shows you that like when you do things for yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
not in a selfish negative way, but when you do things for yourself, you also like affect the community around you.
Right. Because for one thing, you're not the only one that thinks a certain thought. It may not exist, right? Your Taino deck may not exist. My deck doesn't exist yet. But I'm not sort of selfish enough to think that I'm the only one that wants to see this. If I figure if I want to see it, I know somebody else wants to see the same thing. I know somebody else wants a Taino deck. You know, I knew somebody else wanted the Panda deck, and so that's important. And I think that's important too, to just be true to yourself and not worry so much about pleasing the crowd, because the likelihood is that somebody else is for sure going to resonate with somebody, gonna like it.
Exactly. And it's like Shaniqua said, she posted a video today about some lessons and stuff. She's like, and one lesson that really got to me was nobody else has to like your art other than
Hmm.
you.
Yes.
Like in terms of taking criticism and listening to the
Right.
opinions of other people,
Hmm.
like the first and only person is you. And like if you follow that authenticity, like you said,
Hmm.
the people who are also on that wavelength will be
Yep.
attracted to that,
That is so true. Hmm.
and you don't, I feel like it could be common in this deck creator community, especially when you're sharing images online and like you're like, exposing yourself and exposing your art. Like
Hmm.
there's always that potential for somebody to be like, oh, I don't like this, or change
Right.
that, like this
Yes.
needs to be look a little bit different or
Hmm.
whatever. And I think it's important for us to remember that yes, it is a deck that other people are going to use,
Hmm.
but ultimately we're the creators, right? And so
Right.
it has to resonate with us, and
Right.
it
Right.
has
Right.
to really be a part of who we are.
Hmm.
Um so yeah, that's really cool. So I wanted to kind of move on to the last couple of questions here.
Hmm.
I wanted to ask you, so you're working on the art, working on the cards. It seems like you've kind of got your ducks in a row a little bit with the manufacturers and all that
Hmm.
stuff. And so now my question is, what have you been doing for like crowdfunding? Are you planning on like Kickstarters? Are you planning on pre-orders? Like how
Yeah.
can, where your, now that you kind of have the ball rolling with that other stuff, like what are your
Yeah.
plans for that?
Okay, so initially I wasn't going to do Kickstarter. It was going to be direct pre-orders. I'm still sort of leaning towards that. just because there are additional fees, and because it's an indie deck, I'm not ordering a ton of decks, so the price is already going to be higher. If I were to do Kickstarter, that's an additional fee to add on top of it. There are benefits to it, but right now I'm leaning towards pre-orders. I'm not opposed to Kickstarter. I haven't landed on a definite decision about it yet. But that is something that I consider, because I'm thinking I don't want to pass that cost on to the consumer. It's already an indie deck, so there comes a certain price tag for
Right.
that. And that's not from me being greedy. It's just like I can't afford to buy 10,000 decks for a dollar.
Yeah.
Like we ain't doing that here. So, so I'm thinking about all of those things. So for right now, it'll be pre-orders on my website.
Awesome. And
Hmm.
and I'm kind of on the same page as you.
Hmm.
I'm not quite sure what the best thing for me
Right.
is. Because just the cohesiveness and the ecosystem, right, of Kickstarter, like the
Hmm.
promotions and people, like the excitement, right, of people like, oh,
Right.
the Kickstarter is going to launch and everybody's sharing and blah blah blah, all this
Right.
stuff going crazy. But then again, that also happens for pre-orders, so
Right. That's true.
it's not, you don't
Uh-huh.
necessarily give up too much
Hmm.
by doing pre-orders versus Kickstarter, I don't think. But I'm not quite sure yet. I'm still
Yeah,
not
because there's
sold.
that, like you said, that sort of expectation of, oh my goodness, here comes Kickstarter. Have y'all seen the next deck on Kickstarter? And so there's that goes with it. I don't know. I don't know.
I
But I
think
think that's
that
why it's important to share what you're doing now. So you sort of build that excitement and that vigor behind it, so that it really won't matter where you release it, because people are gonna buy
exactly.
it.
And
Hmm.
also, with Kickstarter, things can, and this may not be a bad thing, but it can get like crazy.
Right.
Like all of a sudden you have like 1,000 backers and like you're
Right.
like, and now I have to fill 1,000 orders and it's
It's not
crazy.
a bad problem though.
That,
That's
that's what I
not a
and that's
bad
what I'm
problem.
saying.
Yeah.
It's not a bad problem,
Yeah.
but it does seem like, I feel like it seems like with Kickstarter there's that potential for it to go like super viral and it just
Right.
like, and
Yeah.
you just make a bunch of money. But I've also seen really really successful pre-orders that are,
Hmm.
you just, it's not as transparent with the pre-orders. That's the
Right.
difference. The
Yeah.
consumer doesn't
Yeah.
know how
Hmm.
successful the pre-order is,
Hmm.
because it doesn't show you, oh, this project has whatever $90,000 or
Right.
something.
Yeah.
And so that's, I guess that's the main reason. And so my
Hmm.
plan to figure it out is I want to reach out to people who have done pre-orders and see
Hmm.
how it went for them.
Mm.
See if they're open to like sharing some of those figures and seeing, like, just comparing in numbers and stuff out of curiosity.
That's
Because I
where
think it's
Bell
really
Win comes
important.
in. I'm telling you. The benefit. She has a video. Oh, I love this lady. I swear she's so like thorough, but she has a video where in her book she breaks down certain numbers, and with hers it's even more mystery because there's no shopping cart. It's just if you pre-order,
Mm,
you send the funds to this, and
right.
that's how that goes. So in her book she discusses the first round. I think she maybe did 500, and they sold out within, because she has a larger platform, but they sold out within so much time. And then the second go round she did 1,000, and but she has a thing where she breaks it down on YouTube, the figures. So what is what is like
It's too
to,
much.
I know, man. What it's like to self-publish, what it's like to publish through a publisher, what it's like to publish and then go through like your crowdfunding and all of that. And so I listen, this lady, I can't say her praises enough. She is so sweet, but she is so thorough in the information that she provides, especially for somebody like us that's just now publishing or trying to publish. And the information is just invaluable. It really is.
I think now that you said that, like, it got me thinking too, like with the pre-orders, like, versus like Kickstarter. Like, for example, you said like when she did pre-order, she had like 500 decks and then that was it.
Mhm.
And then she did
Mhm.
second. And so, it seems to me like with the pre-orders, you can like, you manage easier like how many
Right.
decks you're already going to get from the first one, and you don't have to
Right.
worry about like, oh, I have to print more decks now because I wasn't expecting all the backers.
Right.
So like I can see the value in that, of like
Hmm.
not overwhelming yourself, printing a certain amount and then doing
Yeah.
that, seeing how
And
it
I
goes.
guess that helps too with so with the excitement of Kickstarter, I think it's a lot of fear of missing out. So it's like, oh my goodness, let's do this. But if you set the stakes at, okay, well, you know what, I'm only gonna print 500 decks and make that known, then you create the same feeling like, oh my goodness, she's only doing 500 decks. I gotta get mine, you know. So I guess it's a matter of how much you share and sort of how you go about it. But yeah, like this, it's a lot that goes into it. It does.
Yeah, yeah. So does so I guess I don't know, but maybe Kickstarter does its own kind of like promotion, like within its
Yeah.
ecosystem. And so
Wow.
that might be really helpful too, for
Right.
like marketing purposes and people who like maybe aren't like I feel like with the pre-orders too, like for me on my level, like
Mhm.
I have to do a lot more marketing work,
Right.
like
Because
getting the information out,
yeah.
whereas because Kickstarter has that ecosystem, there's that added
Hmm.
benefit, right, of like using
That's true.
Kickstarter. So it's so hard.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm also kind of I'm thinking about it now, but
Hmm.
I'm still super. I haven't even had my first card yet, so
Yeah. Oh wow.
but I
Yeah.
do want to get it like I want to have an idea. I don't want to wait until the end and then start thinking
Right.
about these things. So
Hmm.
now that I'm kind of still in the beginning phases, I'm trying to like figure out what the
Right.
differences are and stuff. So I'm definitely going to check that course out.
Yeah. Yes.
So yeah, that's really awesome. Everybody stay tuned for what either Kickstarter or pre-orders from Brittany. So the last couple things that I wanted to talk about were just like a quick outro and any final pieces, like a final piece of advice, or maybe even like something that you wish you knew before you started this that you know
Hmm.
now. Just something like that, like a final piece of advice. And then, yeah, there's a couple more questions, but let's start there.
Okay, sure. So, for anyone who is looking to create a deck, don't get in your own way. Just start the deck. No matter where you start, no matter if you're an artist or not. Like Johnny said, he does his sketches. Do whatever you can do, but the main thing is just to start. That first step is always going to be the hardest. But after that, you will be surprised at how many people will resonate with you, will resonate with your art and with your vision. So if nothing else, just start doodling. You know, just whichever card calls to you the strongest, start there.
Like you said, like if you are somebody who wants to do this, just go with it, just do it, like don't
Hmm.
be afraid to kind of let it manifest, and don't let your non-artistic skills stop you,
Right.
like
And all of that comes from fear. Like this, you have to move beyond being afraid. I promise.
exactly. Okay, so the last couple of questions, just like where can we support you, like where can we find you, and yeah, what's upcoming, like what's next that we should be paying attention to with
Nice.
you, and how
Yes.
can we support you?
Okay, awesome. Well, you can find me at B Lewis Arts. That's BLEWISARTS on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I think Pinterest is under Blue Lotus Tarot. I'm also under Blue Lotus Tarot, which is BLEW Lotus.tarot. And I'm on Pinterest. As far as what's coming from me, this deck is coming. My tower card is next. I'm so excited. Like, I'm really, really excited to be able to share this, especially since I was so afraid to do it. You know, it's been awesome. It's been an awesome journey, and I really appreciate you, Johnny, for giving me this platform and opportunity to talk to you. It's so humbling, man. I promise. Um, I sell prints of some of the deck images, not all of them. I do sell prints on my website, blewisarts.com. I have an ebook all about shadow work, which is what I specialize in my tarot readings. Yeah, so I'm all over the place. You can find me everywhere.
That's awesome. Well, I've had such an amazing time here with you, Brittany. We covered a lot of amazing topics. I learned a lot from talking with you, and every time I have a new conversation or a new interview with this, like I feel more and more confident in what I'm doing,
Good.
and
Yes.
more confident in just deck creations in general.
Mhm.
So yeah, I really appreciate you, and I'm so glad to be able to host this space and like uplift creators like you, creatrixes like you, women and people of color, people doing things that actually matter, and so
Yeah,
it's
that's so
my
awesome.
pleasure to like uplift you and support you on this journey. And I'm
Well,
really
thank you for having
excited
me.
for your day.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Have a lovely night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Brittany.